My name is Rachel Prasher. I'm the Managing Director of Haymarket Automotive, which publishes Autocar. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here this afternoon to our fourth Great British Women event, this year celebrating the very best rising stars in our industry. We'll be doing that with a series of speeches, interviews, and a panel discussion over the next 3 hours. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker. Laura was appointed Aston Martin's first ever female President of Americas in 2018, having joined the firm from Jaguar Land Rover, where she worked for more than 15 years, holding senior roles in marketing, communications, and sales operations. But I don't want to spoil her inspiring story, which I've had a sneak peek at. Instead, please welcome to the stage Laura Schwab, Aston Martin President of Americas.
Wow, thanks for that. And I think it's pretty awesome that an American's here to talk about great British women. So I actually do have a connection to the UK, so I'll get to my part of the story. And they're like, okay, you've got 30 minutes. I'm gonna try to keep it there. If I'm really running over, just give me the signal. So I'm gonna start with this. Does anyone know what that car is on the, I don't know if they even sell these cars ever over here. That is a 1990 Nissan Sentra. That was my first car ever. And then the other car is an Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, that's 715 horsepower. That's my daily driver now. So, it's been a slight progression from an automotive standpoint for me. And I'm gonna talk to you all about being not only the first ever female president for Aston, but one of a handful of female presidents ever. And my journey and how I got to be standing here today. And I'm really thrilled that you all asked me to be here. So thank you very much. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and the years that I lived in England, when people would ask me where I'm from, and I would tell them Kentucky, there was instant disappointment. Why aren't you from California or Florida or New York or one of those good places? I am from the South, I am from Louisville, Kentucky, I say y'all. In this picture, you might say, which one am I? Thank goodness for hairdressers. So I'm the one in the middle with the brown hair. Clearly not anymore, this is natural. And the funny thing about this picture is I'm wait, I have totally gone retro. I have the exact same haircut, as I did when I was an 8-year-old. So that's excellent, good for me. But I grew up in Louisville, to a very traditional family. That's my brother and my sister. And at a young age, I think my parents noticed I was a little bit different than my siblings. I was very, very competitive. So at a young age, when we would play Scrabble and I was losing, I would accidentally flip the board over. So no, I was if I can't win, no one's winning. And then I bet they don't do this here, but in the South, you do this thing called cotillion, where you learn how to ballroom dance, which is obviously a very important skill set for some people, but for most, not so much. And I would literally, they would play these games, I would knock other girls over so that I could win the bag of M&Ms and the Coke. So my parents were okay, maybe some of the activities she's in, ballet, piano, aren't perfect for her. And I begged them to play tennis. So my mom and dad played tennis. I would watch them play, and I begged them to let me play tennis. And finally, I think they were this is a good idea. Let's let her get these, her emotions on a tennis court and allow her to be competitive there. So I started playing tennis when I was 10 years old. This picture is actually quite depressing because I clearly was hitting the gym a lot. And not so much these days. So I'm not taking this jacket off because my arms don't look like that anymore. But this is me playing tennis in high school. And one funny note for all of my Aston Martin friends, Valkyries, we have a car named the Valkyrie, but that was also my high school mascot. So anyway, I had a connection with Aston Martin well before I ever knew I would even be in the car business. But I started playing tennis. It became a really great way for me to sort of put my aggression somewhere, and actually I became quite good at it. I found my high school years very awkward. I always say my brand of dry sarcasm didn't always translate when you're 15 years old. So high school was very hard for me because being kind of nerdy, sarcastic tennis player did not mean I was the most popular person in school. But what it did mean, this is the really upsetting arm picture, but what it did, I know, I hate it. We've got to change these slides out. But what it did mean is I was on a track with tennis where I really knew that I wanted to go to college, or as university as you would call it here, and go on a tennis scholarship. So I worked my way through high school, survived that, and I decided to end up going to the University of Notre Dame, which is a wonderful sports school. My criteria for college was I wanted to go someplace that was top 20 in tennis and top 20 in academics, and so it narrowed it down to a few. My mom and dad were so desperate for me to go to Notre Dame. It's a Catholic school. They so wanted me to go there. I was like, I'm absolutely not going, which is what most 17 or 18-year-olds do. But then I went on a visit, and it was the place for me, and I joined the tennis team, and I think being part of the team, and in tennis, you're out there as an individual, to all of a sudden be playing for a university was so special. I finally felt like I fit in. But there's something interesting in America, and I'm sure it happens here. When you're 19 years old, you pick a major. This is the what am I going to do with my life? Who am I going to become? And when you're 19 years old, I was always amazed that so many people seem to know. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be an architect. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to be a tennis player, and I'm going to go to this college. And so my process of elimination got me to double majoring in government and Spanish. So when we meet at the break, if you ask me to speak in Spanish, I am not fluent, and I don't really know that much about the government. I know I actually went to school, and so I find this phenomenon quite interesting. I'm like, did I ever study this stuff? But so I major in government and Spanish, and I get to my senior year of college, and we're playing in the NCAA tournament. College sports are a huge deal in the United States, and I have this realization that I'm not going to go pro. My sports career is coming to an end. So my senior year, I decided, well, if I don't know what to do, maybe I will go to law school. Because what do you do with a government and Spanish major? So we lose our final match, and I'm devastated. I spent my entire career focused on tennis, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, now what? I guess I'm gonna go to law school, which I did. So university's 4 years, law school is another 3 years in the United States, and it's actually a doctorate. So you don't kind of make that decision lightly. I was buying time. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna go to law school. And so that summer before law school, actually, I remember this so vividly, they took the tennis team, and we got to come to the UK and play on grass courts. We played at Roland Garros. I drank my face off and had the best summer of my life. And then I show up at Kentucky for law school, and I'm like, okay, so has everyone seen Legally Blonde? In my head, I was like, oh, it's gonna be amazing being a lawyer. I'm gonna wear really great outfits and argue all the time. I can do that. So that is not what law school is about, and that's not what it's like to be a lawyer, just a heads up. And apparently there's an assignment before you show up in law. So I show up I've had the best summer of my life. Everyone else was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. They knew there was an assignment. I was like, wait, there's an assignment? So I entered law school, and I felt as though at age 22, everything started to come crashing down around me because everyone seemed to know that they wanted to be a lawyer desperately. That's why they're there, which is actually makes a lot of sense. You go to law school to be a lawyer. I was in law school to buy time, and I went from being successful most of my life to all of a sudden being this mediocre law student. And I remember I went to after the first semester, I sat down with my parents, and I was like, I just don't think this law thing is for me. I'm not that great at it. Everyone else seems to know they want to be a lawyer. What should I do? And my dad's like, just stick with it for another semester. If you're really miserable, you can quit. And I think he knew I'd never really quit anything. So I finished the first year. I'm like, I might as well go ahead and complete the 3 years. I graduate from law school, and I was in the exact same place I'd been when I had graduated from university. What do I do now? So I start practicing law. And again, I don't know why this was the type of law. I started practicing contract law. I hope there's no like contract attorneys in here. So it is quite dry, to put it bluntly. And I found myself one day, I'm there, I'm practicing law, and I'm agonizing over a very big decision, which was, should it be a semicolon or a colon? I'm like, I don't know. I can't make this decision. It's too hard. This punctuation, I'm not sure. This could make or break this contract. I probably need to ask someone else for their advice. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't think this is for me. And so I quit my job, which is really not my style. And well, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna go? I'll go to California. Now, I think about this now in some of the decisions in my life, and I was like, I'm not sure how I had the guts to step away from seemingly okay career in law, and pick up and move to California. I had some friends living there, and I was like, look, I'm gonna try to interview for some jobs, and if I can get a job, I wanna move to California. Because in the South, in Kentucky, the expectation is like, for me, it would be like, you're gonna be a lawyer, you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids, and you're gonna have this like perfect life in Kentucky. And it just didn't feel quite right to me. So I said to my friends, I'm gonna use your address on my CV. So, because who is gonna hire a girl from Kentucky in California? Basically, my CV's like, I've done nothing. I'd been to school, I'd never worked in my life, all I'd done was play tennis. So I started applying for jobs in California, like any job, like entry level, I don't care how much money it pays, just will somebody please employ me? And I started getting rejected from every place I walked into. And what you normally hear when you start getting rejected from jobs, it's very funny when this happens in your career. It's like, well, you don't have any experience. I'm like, yeah, no shit, I'm trying to get experience here, people. Like, that's why I'm applying, to get my first job. And literally, I could not get a job. And I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna go back to Kentucky. I'm gonna be a lawyer, and this is what's gonna happen to me. And I see an ad, this is in the late 90s. I see this ad, and I think it was on monster.com, and it was like, looking for hardworking. I'm like, boom, got that. Energetic, got that too. And then like, no, something else. I'm like, okay, well, don't have that. But 2 out of 3, I'm not bad. So I go in and I interview for this job. I literally did not know what the business did. And so they were like, okay, we see that you have a lot of education. You know, what do you know about the internet? And I was like, oh, no, I don't know anything about the internet. You know, I'm a non-practicing lawyer. And they're like, oh, what do you know about cars? I'm like, okay, cars. Love cars. So they're like, what kind of car do you drive? I'm like, Volkswagen Jetta. Of course I love cars. So they were like, so basically they explained to me their business proposition, which is we sell cars online and build like, you know, configuration technology. It was like, it's hard to imagine that there was a time, and many of you are young, but in the late 90s, literally configurators did not exist for, you know, like go online and configure a car. So they're like, we sell cars online. And I was like, wow, I would really love a job here. They don't say anything. I go to walk to the door, and the CEO and the HR manager, I guess he had said to her, don't let that brain get to the door, because back then no one knew anything about the internet, and all they were doing was looking for anyone who looked like they might be willing to work hard. So they're like, we are gonna offer you a job. And I was like, oh my God, I am finally getting a job. Like, I can't believe this. And they're like, we are gonna offer you $20,000 a year. I'm like, boom, I am in the money, people. Okay, translate that to pounds. It is not much money, especially in Southern California. And they gave me all these stock options. And anyway, so I take the job at the startup. $20,000 is not enough money to really pay your rent, no less eat for a month. So I had to get a few other jobs to make ends meet. One of them, which I always, have you ever done the game with your friends where it's like, what's the weirdest job you've ever had? It's really funny, right? When people tell you the stuff that they've done in their career. So my weirdest job was one of my 3 jobs when I'm working at the startup company. And have you ever heard of this guy named Tony Robbins? Like, he's like a motivational speaker, and he's in a movie called Shallow Hal. I was, in the evenings, I would go, people like would write him fan mail to be like, you've changed my life and you've motivated me and blah, blah. I wrote responses and I'm like, well, that is fantastic. I'm so happy. I literally, but they gave me, I mean, that was my weird job. And I was like, I wrote for Tony Robbins in the evenings. And they gave me a script, which of course I didn't follow because that's sort of the story of my life and my career. And he actually wanted to meet me, like, because of course I have a law degree, so I'm pretty sure I know how to write. So that was my weirdest job. So I worked 3 jobs. The last week of every month, I basically ate beans and rice. But I was convinced I was going to be a multimillionaire and this thing was going to work out. And this startup company was going to go public. Anyway, I worked for an important person in my life, and I'm going to talk later about mentorship and the people that you meet along the way. But I worked for this guy who was kind of the first digital pioneer in the automotive industry, and he's now the chief marketing officer at Hyundai in the US out in California. And he got a job at Land Rover, and he was like, look, you're not going to become a multimillionaire. I just need to tell you this. And I was like, oh, I think this is going to happen. He's like, you're working 3 jobs, you're making no money. And I think I could maybe help you get a job at Land Rover. It won't be full time. You would be a contractor, but they need someone. They were launching the Freelander in the United States, and they need someone to come in and like build their first website and put a configurator on it. And he's like, you know, if you work really hard, you could get hired full time, but I can't promise you anything. And I was like, you know, I don't know. I still feel like this thing's gonna happen, but I trust you. So I take the job at Land Rover, and I remember I go, this is like my first real job. Because at the startup, like we wore like flip-flops and shorts, you know, it was in Southern California. So my first day at Land Rover, I was like, I need to look pretty professional. So of course I wore a cardigan sweater, which, you know, is, that's professional, people. I put on the pearl necklace, the cardigan sweater. I walk in the door and I meet someone who I'm actually quite good friends with. And the first thing someone said to me is like, are you one of the high school interns? And I was like, no, I am the new project manager. And it's like, I don't even know what that means. So anyway, I start my job at Land Rover. And, you know, I think what I felt like when I got there was everyone had worked there for a long time, and I felt so young. And like, wow, everyone seems to know what they're doing, but I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I'm the only person that understands this digital stuff. So I'm tasked with, you know, it's funny too when you're a contractor, like you don't have the real badge. You've got like the fake badge with the weird color on it. Like you can't go in certain places and you're not allowed to go to like important meetings. I was that person. I didn't even have a real desk. Like I was sort of in this little corner with a chair. And one of my first meetings, they asked me to put a team together. And so I put this project team together and I'm like, we are gonna do this. We're gonna launch this website. And one of the guys looks at me and he's like, why should we listen to you? You look like you're about 12, which of course I take as a compliment now. At the time, not so much. And I was devastated. You know, it's like my first week on the job. So I did what anyone would do. I got in my car and I drove to Taco Bell. And please, like, talk about comfort. I had 2 nachos Bel Grande, which sounds excessive. They're not that big. And I cried, basically. And then I was like, well, maybe, you know, this isn't going to work out for me. So I drive back to the office. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I need these people. I'm the project manager. And I went back up to this guy, and I was like, look, I know you might not think I know anything, but I do, and I need you to be part of this team. And he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, wait, all I needed to do was stand up for myself. So anyway, you know, I stay in that job as project manager. Ford buys Land Rover. They're basically like, you know, you're probably gonna get fired. I had written my first contract for employment. So that was the one time I ever used my law degree. And so they're like, what contract are you on? I was like, I'm on my own. They're like, I was like, please do not fire me. I need this job. This is, you know, I will do anything to stay employed. And they're like, well, the internet job isn't really like a full-time job yet. I know this is impossible to imagine, but literally in the year 2000, internet analyst, coordinator, manager, like those jobs did not exist. And they're like, we do have one job, and it's a data inputter. And I'm like, I will take it. Data inputter. And they're like, and you know what we're going to do for you? You can keep doing the internet stuff. I'm like, I get to do 2 jobs? Awesome. Okay. Did not negotiate that, by the way. I was just like so thrilled to be employed. So I take my 2 jobs. I'm working at Land Rover. And you know what was interesting about it, and I'll talk a bit as my career grew, you know, I started looking around because, you know, when you start in a company and you start looking around for like, well, what do I actually want to, like, what am I supposed to look like? You know, how am I supposed to dress? Who's in those corner offices? And as I looked in all of those corner offices to be like, well, who are these people? They must be very important because they're in these corner offices and I'm basically like in a fake cubicle because it's not even a real cubicle. Every time I looked in the office, it was like a middle-aged white man. And I was like, oh, okay, well, where are all the women? Like, and if there are any, like, what does it look like? And how are you supposed to dress? And what are you supposed to wear? Like, I clearly got the cardigan sweater thing wrong. Like, what is it supposed to look like? And I really struggled because I was struggling to find the people I was wanting to look to as guidance. You know, I'm in my mid-20s, I'm like 26, 27, 28. And thank goodness for my friend Dean, because I needed someone to sort of talk me through this process of working for this huge company. So anyway, I was then told, you know, I'm doing this job and anything that someone else didn't want to do, I was like, I'll do it. I mean, literally it was like, who's going to take the garbage out? I'll do it. I mean, I would do anything, like, just please don't fire me. I have had this fear for a huge portion of my career, like, they're gonna find me out. I don't know anything. I haven't been to business school. I don't know how to do an Excel spreadsheet. Like, I was like, I got a government Spanish degree. And so my fear of constantly being fired led me to like work unbelievably hard, to say yes to every job nobody wanted. In the evenings, I started taking Excel classes because I didn't want to tell anyone, like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I'm doing okay, I'm doing the 2 jobs, and then they're like, you know, this internet thing might not take off. So I was like, I know. Now I'm like, why did I not stick with it? But they're like, you know, you need to go out and learn the car business. And so there was a job in Boston, no one wanted it, and I went out in the field, and I literally knew nothing. I mean, I really knew nothing, but I was so lucky because that first job in the field, I met a very important person in my life, and there was a woman that ran and owned 2 Jaguar Land Rover dealerships in the Boston area, and she's like, are you okay? You look really scared. I was like, I'm supposed to be here to like coach you on your business, like I'm your business liaison, and she's like, I'll teach you the business. And she literally let me work at her dealership for 2 weeks. She's become a mentor to me and someone that I feel like is a sister. And she really helped me sort of start learning how to understand what really was happening in the business. The reason why I mention her is because I am so passionate about people having mentors in their life. And if you're like, I don't know what that means, it's someone who isn't your boss that you can actually say stuff to. So, and it doesn't have to be in your industry, but she became quite important to me. So time moves on. I take the job in Boston. I take a job in Texas. I apply. You know, I finally become a manager. That was my goal. My career was someday to become a manager. Along the way, I was told everything from make sure you wear a suit. So I wore a dress. Cut your hair. That's why it's so long. I've been told to not smile so much. Can't change my face. So I'm not going to. But it was hard, and that's why these mentors and the people in my life became so important to me. So as I'm kind of working my way, there was a job that I applied for in California, and I didn't get it. And this was like to become a general manager. So I'd really like shown that I was willing to work hard and work my way up. And I was told, you know, like, well, you know, you don't have this one little piece of experience. I'm like, okay. So they give the job to this guy. He ultimately takes it and then quits and like moves to Detroit or something like that. And I walked into the vice president and I said, give me the job, give me 90 days. If I don't do it, you can fire me or demote me. And they were in so much trouble. This was like in 2009, you know, the business was, you know, plummeting. And they gave me that job. And I think about it now, I was like, I cannot believe I had the guts to say this to one of our vice presidents, but I did. And it was interesting along the way how my confidence grew. And someone asked me the other day, like, what was the turning point, like, that you would be able to stand in front of vice president and say something like that? I was like, I think the turning point was when I stopped trying to act like them. because I used to always sit in like the back row of the conference. You know, like you go in the boardroom and there's like all the seats around the table, and then there's like the second row of seats. I'm the second row of seats because I'm like, I'm not old enough, my hair's apparently too long, I don't wear suits because I think I look instantly uncomfortable. And when I finally decided that I wasn't gonna have the same notebook, the same pen, and try to talk like everyone else around me, actually that's when things started to take off, because I was so much more comfortable with what I was saying because I wasn't trying to talk like other people. So my career starts to take off, and they ask me, you know, would I be willing to relocate and take an international assignment? And so I'm like, yeah, I'll go anywhere. And by the way, in my career, I've always said I will go anywhere. I've rarely even asked where. I'm like, I will go anywhere. This is still like, I've got imposter syndrome forever. Like, please, just don't get rid of me. I will work so hard. So they tell me, we've decided that we want to make you a director of the business, and we're going to move you to the UK. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm the marketing director for Land Rover. I'm moving to England. This is me looking really happy. My first day, it was a really sunny day. My first day, it was funny, since I'm standing in front of a group of people in the UK, I land at Heathrow. And have you ever had that feeling that you're like, I think I made a really bad decision? I mean, yeah, you know that feeling? But it was kind of late, like I'm already on the airplane, like I've landed, and I was like, this is not good. And so I get a text message from my dad. He's like, how you holding up? I'm like, I'm sitting on the plane bawling. I landed at Heathrow. He's like, okay, you need to probably eat something and get a few glasses of wine. So you know, there's a McDonald's right next to Heathrow Airport. So I go to McDonald's. Like, I've got an eating problem, clearly, like, because I talk a lot about food. But I go to the McDonald's. I drive on the other side of the road. I start figuring it out. Funny story, the guy hands me, I was like, and I need a large Diet Coke. And the guy hands me the Diet Coke. So this is like fresh out of New York City. I land at Heathrow and I'm at the McDonald's. And he hands me the Diet Coke. And it's like as big as this cup. And I was like, no, I ordered a large. And he's like, that is a large. Do you want it or not? I was like, okay, I'll take it. I will take anything right now. And a shot of tequila. So anyway, but I make my way up. I lived in Leamington Spa, and I remember coming to the UK, and in my head, I had this whole thing. Like, people had said to me, you are going to love it. You're going to love being different, and that you sound different, and you probably act a bit different. And I actually thought that I would, but I remember getting to the office and like walking in the door and being like, morning, y'all, and people like, oh my God, what is she doing? It's like she's an alien. What is she? I said to someone once, it was like my first week, I'm like, hey, how's it going? And it's like, what do you want? I was like, I want anyone to talk to me. Like, I don't care, it's not a quiz. And I actually had this whole, like, I'd been so successful, and all of a sudden I started reverting into the, oh gosh, I don't fit in again. Here I am, I've got this team, they've hired me, I'm a director. There were only a handful of directors at the time. And I found it really, really hard and a very difficult adjustment. Because once you get outside of London, there's not like Americans like all over the place. And actually, I didn't like the attention. I didn't like it that I would say things and not realize that I'd said it wrong, or like that's a bad word here or whatever. It's like, this is when you go to a new country. And so I actually had like a full regression of like, who am I? How am I supposed to talk? What do I wear? Wow, look at all those middle-aged white men in those Navy suits. Like, maybe I just need to do the Navy suit thing. Like, that seems to be the path to success in the automotive industry. And I found it really tough. But something important happened along the way. So I haven't told you about the fact, like, if I had a partner in my life. The goofy guy on the side is my friend Frank, and the goofy guy in the middle is Nick. So I had always said that, I always had boyfriends. So I always had to be quite clear about this, because I thought guys would like me because I love sports, I love cars, I hate communicating. Okay, 3 things done, every man's dream, right? So, please, let's not talk that much. Do we have to? So anyway, but I never wanted to be married because I literally had no time, because I was still, again, I mean this so sincerely, I worked so hard because I was always like, they're gonna find me out. And I don't even know why I felt like this. I actually knew what I was talking about. Everything I didn't know, I studied, I took classes. But anyway, Frank is my friend from the United States, and he and I have been friends for a very long time. He had actually moved to Leamington Spa and was like, hey, you know, you're really boring, and you really should. This is Frank. I mean, he's still single, so there you go. But anyway, Frank is like, I'm the boring one. Frank's like, you're very boring, and I think you need to go out. So it was the night of William and Kate's wedding. And I'm like, I guess if there's a night to go out in England, this is probably like my night. And I walked in the door and I meet this guy, Nick. And the story supposedly is that he was like, who is that? I'm asking her out, because these guys thought they knew everyone in Leamington Spa, which I doubt it, but okay. And Nick asked me out, and he asked me out for 4 months. And on the 4th of July, he brought me a homemade apple pie, and I was like, I actually think I'm gonna have to go out with this man. So I agreed to go out with him, and you know, that became really important because I'm gonna talk about his impact on my career. We got married, but like, that's part of the story. But you know, but the reason Nick became important is Nick and I started spending time together. I started leaving the office like a normal person, you know, because I wanted to see this guy. So I had this thing of like, I will stay here forever. Like, I will work harder than everyone else. And then even for my team, I'm like, you go, I've got this. Like, no, you take vacation. I don't need any. And so I meet Nick, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'd actually like to go see this person. My team is like, thank God she's left the office. You know, this is amazing. Could she not have met someone months ago? So note to self as managers, just because you stay late does not mean you've had an effective workday. And also, it's not always good for your team, because all of a sudden I had a newfound appreciation that people actually had lives and that they wanted to see people, and actually staying in the office till ungodly hours did not mean that you were necessarily successful. So Nick and I get married, and all of that's very important, because I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in a second. So things start going well for me. I think because of Nick, you know, I started to have a better sense of probably how to fit in the UK, but also how to have like some sort of balance to my life, and everything wasn't about how fast I could run. I show this because I've been very fortunate to meet pretty much most of the members of the royal family. And it's funny when a girl from Louisville, Kentucky is meeting Prince Charles, because PR people really start freaking out, because they're like, she is going to F this up. And I'm like, no, I won't. But the funny thing about this story, so they, you know, you do the whole thing where it has, if you've ever met anyone from the royal family, you learn how to do the curtsy and what you're supposed to say. I've got it all down pat. His helicopter lands. I'm standing there, and he walks up and they're like, this is Laura Schwab, and she is the marketing director for Jaguar and Land Rover. And I do my thing, and I was like, he's like, no, what is your name again? I was like, I'm Laura Schwab, and I'm the marketing director for Jaguar and Land Rover. He's like, Jaguar? Like, and all of a sudden it's like, Jaguar. And I was like, okay, I've now said it wrong, and I'm like offending the royal family. So he's like, where are you from? I was like, oh, well, I'm from Royal Leamington Spa. And so he starts laughing at me like that. That picture is in like the Sunday Times or something like that. So I send it back to my family in Louisville, Kentucky, and my mom is like, what did you say? You cracked some stupid joke. He wasn't really laughing. You've destroyed relationships between the countries. I'm like, it wasn't that offensive. I said Jaguar wrong. I'm like, I'm American. But anyway, things are going well for me, and I'm really finding my way. I loved living in the UK. I really fit in. I started finding a group of friends, and things were going well at Jaguar Land Rover. I mean, so incredibly supported by so many people there. So not looking to do anything different. That was as close as I got to the Queen. Like, I feel like she was smiling at me, but probably, that's what I tell myself with this picture, but probably not. I'm working away, and I get a message on LinkedIn, which, by the way, LinkedIn is an important platform. I can talk about that. But I get a message from a friend of mine who's the chief marketing officer at Aston Martin. Now, I met him in California those days that I was the data inputter. And he was like a big deal. And so he sends me this message. He's like, Laura, after all these years, can you believe that we're both living in the middle of the UK? He's British, and he's like, I'm the chief marketing officer for Aston Martin. Have you ever done an Aston Martin factory tour? I was like, no, and I couldn't believe, because Jaguar and Land Rover and Aston Martin are literally like on top of one another. I was like, no. He's like, well, would you like to? Absolutely. So it's a summer's day. I get invited to go to Lord's Cricket for a cricket match. It's funny when I tell a story in the US because no one knows what cricket is there. I didn't know much about cricket, but I focused on what was quite important that day was what was I going to wear. And I'm like, cricket, I was like, they wear all white. The people that attend must wear all white too. Okay, they don't. They don't, because they're like drinking a lot of champagne. They don't want to spill stuff. Anyway, I wore all white like I was ready to like pitch in case something went wrong with any of the players. So I show up in my all white, I go to the cricket, I drink the champagne, I take the train back up to Leamington Spa, and I go to the Aston Martin factory, and I meet my friend Simon, and he's like, I'm so happy to see you. It's like no time has passed. I'm like, I can't even believe you remember me. He's like, of course. He's like, everyone remembered how hard you worked. I was like, did I make it look that bad? But anyway, he's like, let me show you the Aston Martin factory. And I was like, this is like the best day ever. So the doors open, and all of the Aston Martin people here know this. But for those of you that have not had an opportunity to go to the Aston Martin factory, it doesn't matter that you don't work for that brand. You literally need to go do it because it is very special. So the doors open, and it's silent. And I was like, oh, are they taking a break? And he's like, no, they're not taking a break. And all of a sudden, he starts walking me through the factory, and I start picking up the sounds, and you hear the sounds of the sewing machines, and they start saying, like, let me tell you how these cars are made. And, you know, the company was founded in 1913, and there's some beautiful stories. I'll geek out about Aston Martin just for a second. There's some beautiful stories about how these vehicles are made. It takes, 250 to 300 hours to hand make every car. In the factory, only one person is allowed to stitch the interior of the car because every person has a unique stitch. So if one person did the left side and one person did the right side, they wouldn't match. So you can only have one individual do it. And we've got people who work for our company that can literally say, oh, they were left-handed. No, the person was right-handed. So Simon starts telling me this, and then he talks about the 50 hours of paint and that it takes 18 months just to create one paint to then bring it into production. And I'm like, he's like, oh, let me tell you about the badge on the front. He's like, it comes from the jewelry district in Birmingham, England. They're hand painted. I was like, this is amazing, Simon. I cannot believe I've been working next to this for almost 5 years, and I've never been on this factory tour. And as we're walking, he's like, well, look here. This is our global CEO, Andy Palmer. And I was like, Andy, awesome job. I was like, y'all are crushing it. I'm so casual. I'm in all white on the factory tour, by the way, which is like so weird. They've like taped up my watch, and I was like, I look ridiculous. And I was like, this is incredible. And Andy's like, oh, it's nice to meet you. And so he's like, well, let me tell you what's happening at Aston Martin. He's like, I joined the company a year ago, and I'm here to bring to life the second century plan. He's like, the next 100 years for Aston Martin. And we were standing in front of a DB11, and he's like, and this will be the first car, and we're going to launch 7 new cars in 7 years. And he starts to tell me what they are, and I was like, should he be telling me this? Anyway, but I'm standing there, and he's like, the DB11, and then there'll be a new Vantage and a TBS, and we're launching an SUV, which we reveal at the end of this year, a mid-engine sports car, 2 fully electric cars, which are going to be Lagondas. He's telling me all this. I'm like, this is really impressive stuff. This has really been an important day. And he looks at me and he's like, and I want you to be part of it. And I was like, wait. I was like, oh shit, this is a job interview? I was like, wait. I was like, have I messed it up? And then I'm like, oh, did I curse? Anyway, Andy's like, we've been following your career. I was like, you've been following my career? It's like, you've got to be kidding me. And he said, we really think that you would be a perfect fit for Aston Martin. And I said, well, what's the job? So we want you to be the president of the Americas. I was like, oh, well, that's quite good. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm not looking for a job. Like, things are going well. I wasn't thinking about moving. Really happy at Jaguar Land Rover, working with like an amazing team, doing cool stuff. So I go home to Nick, and he's like, yeah, cricket, fine. Tell me about the Aston Martin factory, because he's a total gearhead. And he's like, tell me all about and I'm telling the whole thing. And I was like, and then they offer me a job. And he's like, well, what is it? And I tell him, and he pauses, and he looks at me, and you're going to have to bleep this part out, but this is what he said: that is the coolest fucking job in the world. And I'm like, it is, isn't it? So in life where, like, especially if you have a partner, you're like, we're going to have to go have the talk. Because, like, you don't just, like, decide you're going to, like, move to California. And so I'm waiting for Nick to be like, let's go have the talk. Remember, bad communicator on, like, the partner front. And he's like, I said, well, what do you think we're gonna do? And this is, not that I didn't already know that he was the right person in my life. He did not hesitate. We did not go have the talk. In a half a second, he goes, we're moving wherever they're located. And I think about this a lot now, and I beg you to find the right partner in your life. Every person I had been with before Nick would be jealous, controlling, you don't communicate. Nick's like, we're going to California. So I pick up and move to California to take on my job as president of Aston Martin. There's one more twist in the story, and then I'll geek out about cars just a little bit longer and then end with a little advice. But Nick and I had decided that we weren't interested in having children because we were traveling the world, on the weekends when I would take I took a vacation, I took a Friday off through maybe a Monday, but that's our dog, happy life. And anyway, Nick comes to see me, so it's November. I've moved to California, it was November of 2015. And it's our anniversary. And Nick and I were really happy to see one another. And I do know that there's this thing called birth control, but I'd run out, I didn't have a doctor yet, blah, blah, blah. And I'm 42 years old, we're fine. Anyway, so 5 weeks into my job at Aston Martin as one of 2 female presidents ever, the first female president in the history of the company, I get pregnant. And I tell this story especially to women because so how people ask you oh, the day that you found out you're pregnant, it's oh, it must have been such a joyous moment. My initial feeling was a sense of dread because the first thing I thought was they're going to be disappointed that they hired a woman. Now, I don't know why I thought that, but any man would want to be president of Aston Martin. That is the coolest job in the world. And now 5 weeks into my new, cool, awesome job, I'm in California, I get pregnant. So I've got to call Andy Palmer and tell him that I'm pregnant. So I call him and he's like, oh no, it's not going well. You're not happy. I actually called Hazel first, but I call Andy and he's like, we are really happy for you. How much time do they take off there in the United States for maternity leave? I was like, I don't know, maybe 3 months. I've never had a kid before. Anyway, the company was very supportive, but during that time, my husband was trying to get his visa. So I'm in California, I'm pregnant. When you're 42 years old and pregnant, I'll be honest, it was not the prettiest of all pregnancies. It was quite challenging. I'm running a business, and Nick is here because he's trying to get his visa, so he can't travel much. So we saw each other twice during my pregnancy, and fortunately, he got to California 1 week before the baby was born, my daughter Marie, who we've named after my mom. But that time, I also felt like when I was pregnant, had I made the women that worked for me that had been pregnant, did I make them feel the way that I was feeling? Because I was like, oh my God, I had tons of women work for me that got pregnant and they had to come tell me. And I'm like, did I make them feel badly? And I had this whole, again, it's kind of like when I met Nick and I became a better manager, I had this whole sense of reflection about the things that happen in life and the balance of your job and everything. But that's Marie. There she is. That's my university. We took her there in the fall. And then she has an Aston Martin. Because why wouldn't she? I'm in so much trouble. The kid has an Aston Martin. But anyway, that's her Aston Martin next to my Aston Martin. But it's changed who I am significantly. I'm going to talk a little bit about work-life balance in that regard, and I promise I'm going to finish up. I get asked a lot how I do it, and I say often, make sure you ask my husband the same question, because he's working as well. He finally got to the US, working, we have the baby. I don't balance it that well every day, and I'm quite forthright about that. What are we doing at Aston Martin? It's a big job. We've built one of the best teams in the automotive industry. Our sales in the region have gone up over 200% since I joined. When I got there were no women on our executive team. It is now 50% women. we're succeeding. We're the largest market. It was always the UK, so sorry, but we're the biggest now. But it's hard because I probably still have imposter syndrome every once in a while. But what's gotten me through my career, and I'm so proud to be part of this beautiful brand, you know, with all of this history. I'm gonna be one little tiny piece of the history of Aston Martin, and I feel so honored and privileged to be part of such a beautiful brand, but more importantly, to be working with the people that I get to work with every day. And to tell you the type of company that I work for and why it's important, this morning before I came here to give this talk, there's a half dozen of the women that I work with here in the room today. I probably heard from 10 to 15 more wishing me good luck. I work for a place that's supportive, and what's very important for all of us as women is, in my career, I saw this a lot. Women would beat other women up to get to the top because they're like, well, there's only one job. You know, because they look at the boardroom, and when you look at a boardroom in automotive, it's mostly, sorry to the middle-aged white men in navy suits, and I appreciate all the ones that have come here today, but that's what the boardroom looks like. So if there's one woman, you're like, well, there's only gonna be room for one of us. So I'm good if she's bad. And I have zero time for that, because we're actually so much better when we pull our voices together. I beg you to take care of your colleagues, to take care of the young people joining your business. I was that 25, 26-year-old that was petrified, that was scared to speak up in the team meeting, that got nervous when I said my name and my neck would get red, that I could hear my own voice shaking. I was that person. And they need mentors, and they need us, and we have to take care of one another. So I'm a huge advocate of people having mentors, and I beg you to have a mentor. If you don't have one, I will show you my contact information. I will be your mentor. We've got a bit of a time issue because I'm 8 hours behind you, but whatever, we can figure this out. But have mentors. As young people, and obviously all of you are in this room because you've been successful. I've never been in this room as a rising star. I never won, not one of those awards. But I think I've done okay. But because you're here, because you're really special, and when you go back to your businesses, the people that you work with are gonna look at you like you're special. They need you. So tell them about your day, tell them about the people you met. If you do not have a mentor, find one. I've got 3 right now. My friend Sherry in Boston will always be my mentor. I have some outside of the industry, which has really helped me. Once I decided to dream big and stop sort of thinking I could only ever be a manager, things opened up for me, but where it really changed is when I actually started being myself. So please be authentic and genuine, and the best version of yourself you can be. Don't try to talk like the person next to you. Don't have the same notebook. You don't need to have the same pen. You literally need to be you, because that's what people remember. You know, they'll remember the funny story, not about the actual like dress you're wearing, but the Spanx you squeezed into to like get into the dress. That's the stuff people remember, and people will remember you if you're authentic and genuine. So I really think it's hugely important. If you can't find a mentor, please ask someone who has one. Because do people know what mentors are? I think they're like, I don't even know what that means. Someone that you can talk to and open up about. So in conclusion, I'm gonna show you, oh, that was Marie coming to see me at one of my talks, which was kind of cool. What do I have in common with Bill Gates? Very little. Other than I'm a LinkedIn influencer, and I've been really blown away this last year. This is how you can get a hold of me, because that's me on Instagram. But in parting, if you don't leave here today with a name and a business card of someone you didn't know, I think you should. Because the fact that your companies have nominated you to be here, you're obviously special. So leave here with other people. The people that you meet along the way become very special. And the friendships are the things that have empowered me to stick in the business after all the things that I've been told, and to kind of maintain who I am. So hopefully some of this resonated with you today. For the Aston Martin team that's here, I don't get to stand and talk in front of you all that often, and I'm very appreciative of the love and the friendships. And Hazel, that you gave me the chance at the company, so thank you. And I'm honored to stand in front of great British women. As an American who lived here for 5 years, thank you, and I hope you all have a really, really wonderful afternoon.